May God bless your day and the week ahead with immense peace and clarity, especially if right now you feel completely paralyzed by fear or anxiety.
Yeah, that is such a needed blessing today.
Right. Because today we are looking at a legendary historical figure who, well, he started out exactly where you might be, just hiding in a basement, terrified of the world outside.
Which is not exactly the grand origin story we usually expect, you know?
No, not at all. When we think of ancient foundational leaders, like the kind of people who get whole chapters of history dedicated to them, we usually project this expectation of, I don't know, unshakable courage onto them.
We really do. We want a superhero narrative.
Exactly. We picture the fearless warrior on a hilltop, sword raised, absolutely certain of their grand destiny.
Because it's much easier to digest history when the characters fit into those clean binary categories. I mean, we assume bravery is just intrinsic to these figures, like you're either born a coward or you're born a hero.
And the heroes never break a sweat.
Right, exactly.
But then you open up the actual historical and spiritual records, specifically Judges chapter 6, and that neat little superhero category just completely disintegrates.
Oh, it falls apart entirely.
Yeah. So we're pulling from the incredibly detailed insights of the Holman and NAA study Bibles for this deep dive today to look at the story of Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
And the man we find in these sources, he is the furthest thing from a fearless superhero.
He really is. I mean, he's deeply relatable, highly anxious, and a desperately reluctant leader.
Which is honestly so refreshing.
It is. He is the definitive, unlikely deliverer. If you were building an ancient army, Gideon is the guy you'd probably screen out in the first round of psychological evaluations.
Well, for sure. Which basically sets up our mission for this deep dive. We are going to unpack this fascinating psychological and historical progression. Like, how does a man who is literally paralyzed by what-ifs and self-doubt end up becoming the deliverer of an entire nation?
Because, spoiler alert, he does pull it off.
He does. But Gideon isn't just born an anxious wreck. His paranoia is, well, it's the direct result of a societal trap the Israelites had fallen into. The study Bibles call this the cycle of judges.
Right, and to understand Gideon's trauma, you really have to look at the geopolitical reality of ancient Israel at this time. This cycle of judges diagram in the study notes, it outlines this tragic, multi-generational loop.
Okay, break that down for us. What are the steps?
So step one is apostasy. The people abandon their covenant with God and, adopt the corrupt practices of surrounding nations. And because they walk away from that divine protection, step two triggers, which is servitude.
Servitude, meaning they get conquered.
Exactly. They are conquered and oppressed by those very neighbors they were copying.
And it's not a quick turnaround, right? They suffer until the pain becomes basically unbearable.
Right. The timeline varies, but eventually it leads to step three, which is supplication. The people finally break down and cry out to God for rescue.
Which leads to the rescue phase.
Yes. Step four, salvation. God raises up a judge or a deliverer to liberate them. But, and here's the tragedy of the era of the judges, as soon as that deliverer dies, the society immediately relapses into step one.
It reads like a societal addiction cycle. Just a nation continuously hitting rock bottom over and over.
That's a perfect way to put it, yeah.
And as we open Gideon's story, Israel is deep in phase two, right? Servitude.
Very deep. They have been stuck in this brutal oppression for 7 years.
Right, but I want to clarify the nature of this oppression, because the sources paint a very specific picture. This isn't just like a foreign king sitting on a throne in his capital demanding heavy taxes.
Well, no, this is an entirely different mechanism of terror. The oppressors here are the Midianites, who have allied with the Amalekites and other nomadic peoples of the East.
Right.
And these groups originated from the Sinai Peninsula and the Arabian deserts. We really have to understand their economic model to grasp the devastation here.
Because they weren't farmers themselves, right?
Exactly. As semi-nomadic pastoralists, they didn't rely on their own established large-scale agriculture. Instead, they leveraged the settled agrarian societies around them.
So they basically treat the Israelites like their own personal unpaid farming staff.
It's an ancient, brutal protection racket, minus the actual protection. They wouldn't set up a permanent occupying bureaucracy. They were seasonal raiders.
Seasonal raiders, wow.
Yeah, and the text uses this chilling metaphor, describing them invading like a swarm of locusts. They would wait until the Israelites did all the grueling months-long labor, tilling the hard earth, planting the seed, tending the crops.
And right as the harvest turns golden and it's finally time to eat, this massive, uncounted horde sweeps across the land.
Just devastating everything in their path.
Yeah. The study notes mention they pushed all the way down to Gaza on the coast. And they didn't just skim a percentage of the profits like a tax. The sources are explicit. They left absolutely no sustenance. No sheep, no oxen, no donkeys.
And by taking the livestock, they crippled the Israelites' ability to farm the next year.
Right.
And by taking the crops, they instituted forced starvation. It's a calculated tactic of psychological and economic warfare. It completely dehumanizes the population.
It's terrifying.
How?
The historical record notes that the Israelites were reduced to fleeing their own homes, literally scratching out an existence in mountain caves and strongholds.
Which perfectly sets the stage for where we first meet our supposed hero, Gideon.
Yes, because he isn't out rallying troops in a town square. He's threshing wheat in a winepress at a place called Ophrah.
Right.
Now, to truly appreciate how absurd this is, you have to understand ancient agricultural mechanics. I like to think of threshing wheat in a winepress as the equivalent of trying to fly a kite in a basement.
I love that analogy. It structurally does not work.
Not at all.
Let's look at the why and how of ancient threshing. To process wheat efficiently, you need an exposed, elevated threshing floor. You crush the wheat stalks, often by having an ox drag a heavy sled over them, and then you take a winnowing fork and throw the crushed mixture up into the air.
Because you desperately need the wind. The wind catches the lightweight, useless chaff and blows it away, while the heavier, edible grain just falls straight back down to the floor.
Precisely. You need elevation and you need wind. But a winepress is the exact opposite environment.
Right, it's a hole.
It is a pit carved down into the bedrock designed to hold liquid. There is zero breeze down in a hole. So picture Gideon down there. He can't use an ox. He can't use a winnowing fork.
No.
He is likely sitting in the dirt, just meticulously rubbing the wheat stalks between his hands, absolutely terrified of making a sound or kicking up a cloud of dust that might tip off a passing Midianite patrol.
He is literally hiding his lunch in a hole in the ground.
Yeah.
He is traumatized. And this is the moment, this literal pit of anxiety, where a divine visitor decides to show up.
Talk about timing.
Right. The angel of the Lord comes and sits under an oak tree belonging to Gideon's father. And the angel looks down at this terrified guy in a hole and delivers what has to be the most ironic greeting in historical literature.
The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.
Mighty warrior. I mean, the guy aggressively rubbing a handful of wheat in a basement. If you are Gideon, you are definitely looking over your shoulder to see if a soldier is standing behind you. The dark humor of that contrast is incredible.
It really is. But the contrast reveals a profound theological truth about how this divine encounter operates. God is entirely ignoring Gideon's current miserable reality and speaking directly to his potential.
Oh, that's good.
He is naming the man Gideon will become through divine empowerment, not the man he currently is. But Gideon, understandably, is completely anchored in his trauma.
And I love Gideon's response here. Because he doesn't fall on his face in reverent silence, he gets sassy. He immediately challenges the theology of the greeting.
He really does. He essentially replies, "Pardon me, my lord, but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us?"
It's a very raw expression of the problem of suffering.
Exactly. He points to the foundational stories of his faith, the exodus from Egypt, the miraculous deliveries his ancestors passed down, and he demands to know where all those wondrous works are now. He concludes pretty bluntly that the Lord has simply abandoned them to the Midianites.
And you listening right now, just put yourself in his shoes for a second. If you've been living in a cave for 7 years watching your children starve, that level of disillusionment is entirely justified.
Absolutely.
But the fascinating part is that the angel doesn't even debate him. There's no philosophical defense of God's actions. The text says the Lord turned to him and simply issued a commission. Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?
It's a staggering mandate. But Gideon immediately throws up a defensive shield of excuses. He claims he is the absolute least qualified person on earth. He says his clan, Manasseh, is the weakest, and he's the least in his family.
Okay, I have to jump in and push back on Gideon's narrative here.
Yeah.
Because the study notes in both Bibles highlight a massive contradiction.
Oh, the poverty claim.
Yes. Gideon plays the poor, insignificant peasant card. But let's look at the evidence that unfolds in the rest of the chapter.
Yeah.
His father, Joash, owns an altar to Baal. He owns a wooden Asherah pole. He has a herd with multiple bulls.
Right.
And later that very night, Gideon casually rounds up 10 of his own servants to help him with a task.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have 10 servants on standby if you are the poorest guy in the weakest family.
Mm-hmm.
Is Gideon just lying to get out of the draft?
It is highly likely. The study Bibles emphasize that his claim of insignificance is an exaggeration born entirely out of fear. It is a psychological defense mechanism.
Just self-preservation.
Exactly. And this actually mirrors another famous historical calling, Moses at the burning bush. When commanded to confront Pharaoh, Moses used the exact same avoidance tactic, claiming he was a nobody who couldn't even speak well.
Right. Send somebody else.
Yeah. Gideon is exhibiting a textbook response to an overwhelming divine calling.
He's terrified, he's making excuses, but God reassures him, saying, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites. But Gideon is a pragmatist. He's not going to risk his life on a strained conversation under an oak tree. He demands proof.
He asks the visitor to wait while he prepares an offering. And this highlights your previous point about his wealth. He doesn't bring out a meager snack. He prepares a young goat and unleavened bread made from an ephah of flour.
An ephah is a lot.
A substantial amount, roughly half a bushel or about 40 pounds of flour. He brings the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot.
So he brings it all to the rock under the oak tree, and the angel tells him to put the meat and bread on the rock and pour out the broth. Then the angel merely touches the food with the tip of his staff.
And instantly, fire flares up out of the solid rock, completely incinerating the wet meat and bread, and the angel just vanishes.
Just boom, gone.
It's a localized, undeniable display of supernatural power. But rather than being pumped up by this, Gideon's skepticism is instantly replaced by sheer terror.
Because he realizes who he's been talking to.
Yeah, right. In the context of ancient Near Eastern theology, encountering the pure, unshielded holiness of God face to face meant instantaneous death for a sinful mortal.
He thinks he's a dead man. But the Lord, even though no longer visibly present, speaks a word of profound reassurance to him. Peace. Do not be afraid. You are not going to die.
Overwhelmed by this grace, Gideon builds an altar and names it Yahweh Shalom. The Lord is peace.
He has his undeniable sign. He has divine peace. But the very first mission God gives him is surprisingly unexpected. It's not a command to march out and fight the Midianite army.
No, it's a highly dangerous, intensely local domestic mission.
This is where we really see the mechanics of that cycle of judges at work. Before Israel can experience political and economic liberation from Midian, they have to address the root cause, which is their spiritual apostasy.
They have to start at home.
Literally, God commands Gideon to clean house. He tells him to tear down his own father's altar to the Canaanite god Baal and to cut down the wooden Asherah pole standing next to it.
And we really need to explain why these specific idols were so crucial to the town.
Right, because they weren't just decorative.
Exactly. Baal was worshipped as the god of storms and rain, and Asherah, often represented by a wooden pole or stylized tree, was a fertility goddess. Remember, the Midianites have been starving this town for 7 years.
Wow, okay.
The people aren't just worshiping these idols as a casual hobby. They are desperately clinging to them, hoping the storm god and the fertility goddess will finally give them a harvest they can actually keep.
That makes the town's eventual reaction make so much sense. If you destroy those altars, in their minds, you aren't just offending their religion, you are actively cursing their food supply.
It's an existential threat to them.
And God's instructions to Gideon are wonderfully ironic. Gideon is told to build a proper altar to the Lord, take his father's second bull, a prized 7-year-old bull, and sacrifice it, using the chopped down Asherah pole as firewood.
The symbolism of the 7-year-old bull is vital here. The Midianite oppression had lasted exactly 7 years.
No.
Yeah, this bull represents the exact lifespan of their suffering and starvation. Sacrificing it with the wood of the very false goddess they thought would save them is a complete public repudiation of the apostasy that got them into this mess.
It is brilliant poetic justice. But, true to form, Gideon is still wrestling with his anxiety. I mean, he obeys the command, but how does he do it?
Under the cover of total darkness.
Naturally.
He takes 10 servants, waits until the middle of the night, demolishes the altar, cuts down the pole, and burns the bull. The text is brutally honest about his motivation. He did it at night because he was terrified of his family and the men of the town.
I honestly find this incredibly comforting. He just witnessed a literal explosion of divine fire. He had a conversation with God, and yet he is still terrified of his neighbor's opinions.
It's so human.
Right. He is inching his way toward bravery, but he is fundamentally still a fearful guy. And his fear was completely justified, because the next morning, the town wakes up, sees the smoldering wreckage of their worship center, and absolute chaos ensues.
It's a full-blown mob scenario. They investigate, connect the dots to Gideon, and march directly to his father Joash's house. They demand Joash hand over his son for execution.
Which is mind-boggling when you think about the biblical law. The town is demanding to enact the Israelite penalty for idolatry, which was death. But they want to apply it to the one guy who just destroyed the idols.
Their moral compass is completely inverted.
Totally upside down.
It demonstrates how deeply entrenched they were in that apostasy phase. But this is the moment where Joash, Gideon's father, steps up. And his defense is just a masterclass in logical deconstruction.
He stands between the angry mob and his son and basically says, "Are you guys really taking it upon yourselves to defend Baal? If Baal is a real god, let him defend his own altar."
It immediately diffuses the tension by exposing the impotence of the idol. Joash argues that if Baal is truly a god of storms and power, a mortal man who knocks over his altar should be struck by lightning on the spot.
But the sky is silent.
Right. Baal does nothing because Baal is nothing. From that day on, Joash gives Gideon a new nickname, Jerubbaal, which translates to "let Baal contend."
And the study notes point out how powerful that nickname is. It becomes a permanent walking mockery of the Canaanite religion.
Yes, every single time someone calls Gideon by his new name, they are forced to remember that their terrifying storm god couldn't even defend his own front yard.
Gideon survives his hometown. The internal spiritual rot has been challenged. But right on cue, the external geopolitical threat escalates massively.
The Midianites, Amalekites, and the armies of the east realize the harvest is ready. They cross the Jordan River and assemble a massive combined invading force in the Valley of Jezreel.
This isn't just a raiding party anymore.
No, this is a sprawling military encampment.
And here we witness a dramatic shift in Gideon. The text says the Spirit of the Lord clothed him. He grabs a ram's horn, blows a trumpet call, and successfully rallies his own clan, the Abiezrites, who, by the way, just days prior wanted to execute him.
Talk about a quick turnaround.
Right. He then sends messengers throughout the surrounding tribes, Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they actually respond. A resistance army gathers around him.
He has the troops. He has the divine mandate. The stage is set for a heroic charge, but
Gideon is still Gideon. The anxiety flares right back up as he looks at the sheer size of the enemy camp. He hits pause on the whole revolution because he needs just one more guarantee.
Which brings us to the famous test of the fleece, which is honestly a profound case study in how God handles human frailty.
Walk us through what he does.
Gideon proposes a very specific conditional test to God. He places a woolen fleece on the hard dirt of the threshing floor overnight. He says, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know."
He wakes up early the next morning, and it seems to have worked perfectly. The ground is bone dry, and when he squeezes the fleece, he wrings out a whole bowl full of water. Miracle confirmed, right?
You'd think so. But the study Bibles point out something fascinating about the natural physics of this first test.
I love this part.
To understand Gideon's hesitation, think about how a dry sponge behaves if you leave it out on a damp counter overnight. Wool naturally absorbs ambient moisture from the air much more efficiently than the hard, compacted earth of a threshing floor.
It basically acts like a sponge.
Exactly. So Gideon's anxious, overactive mind starts churning. He likely rationalizes the miracle away. What if there was just a really heady natural dew last night and the wool just soaked it up because that's what wool does?
He overthinks himself right out of his confidence.
Right. So he approaches God a second time, very cautiously. He says, "Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece, but this time make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew."
Which is completely different.
Yeah, he is asking for an event that actively defies the natural physical properties of the wool.
And that night, God does it. The fleece is completely dry while the ground all around it is soaked. Gideon finally has the undeniable, physics-defying confirmation he needs to lead the army forward.
He finally believes it.
Now, looking at this back and forth, I look at the fleece test, and honestly, I expect God to strike him with lightning for being so ungrateful. I mean, he's already seen fire erupt from a rock. Why doesn't God punish him for this blatant lack of faith?
This brings us to what scholars call divine accommodation. It's one of the most beautiful insights we can draw from these texts.
Divine accommodation, I like that.
Yeah, God does not demand that Gideon instantly rise to some lofty standard of perfect, unwavering faith. Instead, God accommodates Gideon's weakness. He steps down into the messy, irrational depths of Gideon's anxiety to patiently build his trust. God meets him exactly where he is.
It completely shatters the illusion of what it means to be a hero of the faith. The story of Gideon isn't a tribute to a man who possessed flawless, Instagram-ready bravery.
Not at all.
It is the story of a man who was paralyzed by fear, who constantly second-guessed his calling, and who started his grand journey desperately hiding in a wine press.
It reveals that divine purpose doesn't require human perfection. It merely requires a willingness to take the next terrifying step, even if your hands are shaking and you're begging for reassurance along the way.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to explore in your own life today. We often hold ourselves back waiting for the fear to disappear before we act. But maybe true courage isn't the total absence of fear or doubt.
That's a great point.
Maybe real courage is being willing to step forward even while you are still asking for a fleece. So what wine press are you hiding in today? What calling or conversation or risk are you avoiding because you feel like the weakest person in the room?
Something to really think about.
If this story proves anything, it's that you do not have to be fearless to be used for something incredible. Thank you for joining us as we explore this amazing historical narrative in today's deep dive. Remember that God blesses all of you, our listeners, wherever you happen to be on your journey. Until next time, keep digging deep.